very mobile. Sometimes like this one has a solar panel on it. You can power them that way. We were fortunate we didn't have to do that on our installation, but more about that later. These are photos of the tags, different sizes, and some of them, as you can see, are really small. We've always done bird research here at Woodland Dunes, and we were founded, as many of you know, by Bernie Bruchot, who was a licensed bird bander. And he banded in the first couple of years, like 22,000 birds. And so far, we haven't been banding at that rate, but I'm a bander also. We're up over 30,000 birds that have been banded here. This is Bernie with a little saw-whet owl showing some people. Bird banding is wonderful. You learn a lot. You place these little aluminum bands on the leg of the bird. Each band has a unique number. You release the bird. If it's found by another bird bander or by anyone, there is a phone number. Now, in some cases nowadays, they have the website of the bird banding laboratory, so you can report the bird where you found it, and in return, they will tell you where it was banded and when. And we learn through that where birds go and how long they live. It's a very good system, and over 1 million birds that were banded have been recovered, but many millions of birds have been banded, and we know that there's a low probability that those birds will be recovered. This is a little American redstart female that we banded last fall. Jessica and I did, and we, caught the bird, banded it, released it. We know that it's unlikely that anyone is ever going to find that bird. There are only so many bird banders that have stations up, and when a bird dies, it's unlikely that the bird is going to be found. But it's the best thing that we had for many, many years. Now with radio telemetry, again, you catch the bird, and often they will put a traditional aluminum bird band on the leg, but they'll also put these little transmitters on, and in using that, the bird doesn't have to be caught again. It can be detected by these remote antenna stations, and there are several hundred of them in the United States right now. So the bird can fly by and be detected, but you don't have to catch it. You don't have to find it after it's perished. Hopefully this little piping plover will live for a long time. And Motus is kind of neat in that it's a non-profit collaborative. They develop these radio receivers that are relatively inexpensive. 10, 15 years ago, it would cost many thousands of dollars to put up a radio detection station. The tags themselves cost thousands of dollars. So it was very limited to the extent that you could do this kind of thing. The Motus receiver now consists of just a small computer and an array of antennas, and you want to strategically place that where birds or other animals are going to pass by during their migration. And Motus actually means Latin for movement. which is what we're looking at. How did we get involved? Well, this wonderful gentleman, Bill Miller, who at the time was the executive director of Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory, which we like to call Wiggly Beebo if you use the acronym. They're down north of Port Washington. Bill had found out about this Motus project, which was running in Canada, and reached out to several other places like ours that are located in areas where a lot of migratory birds pass. And it was a very interesting concept, and we were able to raise a little bit of funding and do our own station here. And again, Woodland Dunes is in a really good place to observe migratory birds. This is the Mississippi Flyway. You can see it's branched off in a number of places, but birds funnel through the Great Lakes. They naturally will come down here. They don't have to cross a large body of water to migrate. They also come down through here and go right down the coast of Lake Michigan. That's something that's easy for them to follow, and it helps them navigate during their migration. And other birds come from the west and follow the Mississippi River. So good spot, and you can see by this aerial photo of Wisconsin that, again, if birds are following the shoreline, right here is Woodland Dunes. Here's Point Beach. Both wooded areas, both attractive to a lot of different kinds of birds. So good spot to put up a detection station. So as of this point, Motus has been deployed in 31 different countries on 4 continents. There are over 1,000 Motus stations worldwide, 944 partners, including ourselves. And so far, 236 species of animals have been tagged and more than 25,000 animals altogether. And there are researchers that are doing studies on different animals. They're the ones that are really driving this, and they're the ones that are capturing animals and putting the tags on them. So there are more than 370 projects so far that have been going on involving not only birds, but bats and insects. And at one meeting I was at, one researcher was interested in tagging turtles that lived within their nature preserve so that they could track the movement of the turtles from day to day in the wetlands that they had. So there are all kinds of applications for this kind of stuff. Our installation is out on Goodwin Road. A lot of you are probably familiar with the little air station that's out there about a quarter of a mile east of Woodland Drive. The air station is a building that DNR owns. It's on our property. They own the building. They have computers in there and sampling equipment, and they are looking at air quality along Lake Michigan. And you know, when you hear of ozone advisories and things like that, that's where some of that data comes from. There are a number of trees around there, but they're not too tall. So there's a good line of sight for our antennas. Actually, the Motus system can see, if you will, out about 15 kilometers. So we're only about 1 mile from the shore of Lake Michigan at that point. So our station is looking out over the lake and to the east and west and north from there. Another advantage that we have locating our station there is that the building already has electric service. They heat it, they cool it in the summertime, and there's a security fence around it, so nobody can mess with the antennas or any of the equipment. DNR was more than willing to let us put our equipment in with theirs in the air station. We have a really good relationship with DNR in operating that air station. So it was no problem on their part having us add that in there. So this is during installation. The photo on the left, this is actually the guy from the satellite installation place down the road, Country Satellite, that's the name. He came out and put up the antennas, and then on the right is when we were finishing installing the cabling and things like that that go inside the building. And inside the building, there's this little tiny computer, much smaller than a desktop computer, but it doesn't have to do a whole lot. It only is set up to detect these radio signals. They put them in a weatherproof case so that you can mount that outside if you want to. But again, we have an ideal situation there in that we can leave it inside and it's perfectly protected. And you know, if we didn't have power, you could hook up solar panels to this and put it in a really remote location. Some of them are like that, but that requires a lot more maintenance. This is very easy to get at. So twice a year, we go out, another volunteer and I retrieve the data. There's a little chip in the computer that can be removed. You know, that data is put onto a laptop. They need to clean it up because it does record a lot of just interference from different sources. And you have to sort out what's actually a signal from a transmitter versus just background noise. And then that information is sent to the Motus headquarters in Ontario. And just a few days later, we'll receive information on the birds that were detected. So since our deployment in 2019, it was late in 2019, we've gotten 8 birds, and that may not seem like a lot, but if you look at all of the different stations that are around the country, 8 is actually quite a few. Even though we can see out for 15 kilometers in any direction, there are only a certain number of birds that are tagged, and a certain number of those are passing by us. So we're actually doing a really good job of harvesting this data regarding the movement of birds past our nature reserve. And 8 of the 8, 4 have been Swainson's thrushes, which is really interesting. 1 Virginia rail, 1 Dunlin, 1 ruddy turnstone. And there are a lot of people that are tagging shorebirds or waterbirds. There are some significant research projects to do with that. And 1 junco from Indiana. So I'm going to switch over now to the Motus website, and I'll show you some things about where the stations are and the birds that we have recovered. Take me just a minute to do this. There we go. Okay, this is what Motus looks like. This is the title page. Here's a dragonfly with a little receiver on it. That would be fascinating to do. Okay, I'm going to go to receiver locations. Bring this up. In a minute, there should be a map. There it goes. Thank goodness. This morning we tried this and it didn't work at all. For some reason, the Motus website was down. All the yellow dots are different Motus stations. You can see there's a lot of them out east. Very few in the Great Lakes. We're the northernmost one on Lake Michigan on either side of the lake. There's one up at Whitefish Point, up north of Houghton, and then around Bayfield, Ashland, and the Lake Superior coast on what they call the North Shore up by Duluth. There are a number of stations. And if you go up into Canada, and of course, here's Ontario, that's where Motus is headquartered and where it was developed. And there are a lot of stations there. There are some around Hudson Bay, and there are some way high in the Arctic where they are tracking shorebirds that nest up there. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to bring up our station. Okay, and it shows that we're part of this Wiggly Beebo Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory subnetwork. We're a partner with them. Tags detected, we've got 7 here. And we can look at some of them. Here's a Virginia rail, the first one that we detected. And it was through a project through Ohio State University. And I can bring up a map of where this bird has traveled. And then, and you can see here's our location. Here's where it was first tagged. And we can also do an animation showing where the bird went. And you can see it's kind of discontinuous. It wasn't always detected, but it started moving up here. And it goes all the way over to Prince Edward Island and back twice. Then it goes to Wisconsin. Then it goes back down to Ohio. And then at a later date, it shows up over here in Pennsylvania. I think it's right at the end of the animation. There it goes. And it goes up to the St. Lawrence River. So that's the Virginia Rail. Really interesting movement, not the just typical north and south that you would expect during migration. It really moved all over the place over the course of a couple of years. And again, that's a bigger bird that can have a little bigger receiver on it, and the battery lasts longer, so you can track it longer. Here's one of the Swainson's thrushes, and we've always known that Swainson's thrushes are kind of abundant in the fall here at Woodland Dunes. Bernie banded many thousands of them. But it turns out that a lot of them are from Western North America, up in Canada. And during their migration, they follow usually the tree line. This is forest up here, plains here. They kind of come across, and then when they reach the forest around the Great Lakes, then they head south. So we're going to run the animation on this guy. And they just kind of generalized this line. I'm sure it's a little bit north of there, but it gives you the dates. So it took them a while to get over to Wisconsin. And then he headed south to South Carolina. And I'm sure kept going south from there to Central America or Northern South America. And that's pretty typical for Swainson's thrush. Try another one. Kind of did the same route. So in August, he was over British Columbia, and they did detect this one up in Saskatchewan. So it took them a couple weeks to get over to Saskatchewan. Then he headed down and just north of Minnesota a week later. And then just a few days later, he was in Wisconsin. And that was the last time that this one was detected. Ruddy turnstone was really interesting. It really bounced around back and forth between the St. Lawrence River and places to the south and west of there. There it goes. That's where he was last detected. So, and we know that they go farther south than that, but our Dunlin was really all over the place. So he was tagged here, went to here, and he's already up here in not very much time. Talk about an antsy bird. So he's making all these little hops, which aren't little at all, really, moving back and forth between bodies of water. And he likes the Gulf Coast, and he likes Bahamas, and somehow came over to Wisconsin. And again, the other Swainson's thrushes are similar. The dark-eyed junco was tagged in Indiana. see if I can find it. Right here in Indiana, near Bloomington. They don't try to line out where his migrations were, but he was tagged here. He was detected here on March 17th, a year ago. And later on March 17th was detected all the way up here. So this bird at that point was really seriously migrating north. That's a long way to go. That's at least 150 miles, which is about what they estimate that a lot of songbirds will do in one day. Okay. There we go. Now I'm back. So that's our actually 8 birds, which were deployed. I did these when the website wasn't working this morning. So our goals from now on, you know, this is a wonderful thing in that it's always detecting. We don't have to be there. We just have to go and get the data every once in a while. So we want to continue to do that. In that way, we're contributing to research that's being done by others. And that's always been kind of the goal of our bird banding efforts. We don't at present have our own research projects going on, but we want to make ourselves available to help others with their research projects. We think there's a great potential to have a second Motus receiver here, probably right on our headquarters. We can see to the north, we have a great line of sight over the marsh, east, over the city of Two Rivers to Lake Michigan again. And I'm certain we would detect additional birds. And someday we would like to initiate some of our own research, tagging birds that we catch here as part of our bird banding operation. Right now, the cost has come down quite a bit, but it's still, you'd be looking at probably $200 per tag for these little radio tags that they attach. And you have to buy a minimum of so many at one time. So it is a bit of an investment, but fascinating, the results that you get. So that's what we have going on with Motus as an extension of our bird banding. I do want to thank Steve Langton, who gave us the donation that initially started or made us able to start our Motus installation. The Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory for their support, Wisconsin DNR, of course, and Davor Gurgic, who is a volunteer for Wiggly Bebo, but he is the tech guy who is able to figure out exactly how to pull the data off, clean it up, and send it into the Motus headquarters in Canada. He's a wonderful person to work with, and we're very fortunate. So, okay, does anyone have any questions?